Stop scrolling right now because what you are about to hear is not just another royal headline. This is the documented, lawyer-verified, signed and witnessed account of how the youngest son of Queen Elizabeth II walked into Buckingham Palace with a stack of legal papers under his arm and brought the entire authority of the king to a complete and absolute standstill. Prince Edward and Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh, have just launched a direct, no turning back, no second chance, no quiet retreat fight against King Charles III and Queen Camilla. And it is already tearing through the inner walls of the royal family. At the center of it stands the Bagshot Park inheritance and a tiara that Queen Elizabeth II personally gave to her favorite daughter-in-law. Then Camilla made a shocking move against both of them, and Edward could not let it stand. He brought in top property and constitutional lawyers, and he dropped a file of documents on the palace's table that nobody, not the king, not the queen consort, not the master of the jewel house, ever saw coming. What those papers exposed is something the palace desperately needed the world never to find out. So pause and take a breath, because by the end of the next several minutes, you will understand exactly why historians, 50 years from now, will point to this single week in March of 2026 as the moment the modern monarchy fractured along a line nobody outside the family even knew existed. Picture the scene. On the morning of March 25, 2026, a team of senior property lawyers walked straight into the Crown Estate offices and placed a thick legal file on the table. Inside that file was everything Prince Edward had spent years quietly building. Every signed agreement, every private payment, every piece of evidence that proved what he had been given, and more importantly, what could not legally be taken from him. This was not a panic. This was not a rushed response. This was not a scrambled defense. This was a strategy constructed piece by piece, year by year, witnessed and notarized for exactly this moment. And at the center of it all sat one question that was now cutting through the royal family like a blade. How did the youngest son end up holding something the king himself believed he could simply take back? To understand that, you have to go back to the final, careful, deliberate decisions made by Queen Elizabeth II before her death in September 2022. She knew exactly what she was doing. She had watched her family change. She had watched the pressure build, around money, around titles, around control. She had watched Prince Andrew. She had watched Prince Harry. She had witnessed the slow drift of a modern monarchy into a quieter, leaner, more controlled institution. So she made her intentions absolutely clear while she still had the breadth and authority to do so. The Duke of Edinburgh title was not up for debate. Queen Elizabeth II had already decided long before her death that it would go to Prince Edward. This was deliberate. That title had defined Prince Philip for more than 70 years. It was his life's role, his public identity, the signature of his decades of service. And Elizabeth made absolutely sure that it would pass to the one son who remained steady, who stayed out of scandal, and who never brought harm to the institution. The son who, despite being the youngest and the quietest, had earned through patience and discipline the right to carry his father's name. That promise was fulfilled in April 2023, when King Charles III officially handed Edward the title. But this is where the real story begins. Because the title was only ever half of what Prince Edward inherited. The other half was Bagshot Park. This was not just a house. This was the seat of the dukedom, a 120-room Tudor Gothic mansion sitting on 51 acres inside Windsor Great Park. A house with weight. A house with history. A house that, in the architecture of monarchy, anchored the title to a physical space. And in her final years, Queen Elizabeth II signed a letter of intent that tied that estate directly to the Edinburgh title. That letter was witnessed by Prince Philip himself. Read those last words again, as he was dying. Philip understood, with the clarity of a man who had spent his entire adult life inside the institution, exactly why that letter mattered. He knew that without it, Prince Edward could lose everything tied to that title. So Elizabeth, in tandem with Philip, locked it in. The title and the estate were meant to stay together. That was their final joint, fully witnessed decision, the last meaningful act of the longest royal partnership in modern British history. But after they were both gone, a different mindset took over inside the palace. For years, King Charles III had believed something very simple: and, as it would turn out, very dangerous. He believed that as king, he had the final say over royal property, over royal titles, over anything connected to either. He believed modernization gave him the right to review everything, to cut costs, to restructure, and, if necessary, to take things back, to redraw the lines his mother had drawn. By 2026, that belief had turned into action. There were reviews of royal leases. There were financial audits. There was pressure being applied behind closed doors to change how members of the family lived. And Bagshot Park, the quiet, steady, beautifully maintained home of the Duke of Edinburgh, became a target. This is where the story turns ugly. Prince Edward received the dukedom in 2023 after waiting his entire life for it, after watching his father carry that title for decades. He had waited decades. He finally stepped into that role, and within 3 years, the same institution that gave it to him began trying to strip away the home that gave the title its meaning. He was not just being challenged, he was being weakened. Because without Bagshot Park, the dukedom becomes empty. Just a name without a base, just a title without a foundation. And what makes this even worse, what should make every fair-minded viewer pause, is the truth about what Prince Edward actually took on when he received that estate. Bagshot Park was in poor condition when it was offered to him. In 1996, when the army chaplain who had been using it left, the building was worn out, outdated, and had been ignored for years. The Crown Estate did not even want to keep it as a royal residence. There were serious plans to turn it into a hotel or a conference center. That is how little institutional value it carried at the time. Instead, it was handed to Prince Edward under a lease signed in March 1998. The terms were clear, £5,000 a year for 50 years. But that low rent came with a heavy burden. He had to restore the property, not slowly, not over time, but immediately. And he did exactly that. He invested £1.36 million of his own private money he had earned himself through his own television production company before becoming a full-time working royal. The total cost of repairs reached £2.98 million. The Crown Estate covered part of it, but Edward carried a significant financial burden quietly, without complaint, without press releases, and without the world knowing. Once the work was completed, his rent was increased to £90,000 per year. The National Audit Office confirmed that figure as full market value. He paid market value. He paid the proper rate. He followed every rule. He followed every rule the institution asked him to follow. His brother Prince Andrew never did that. Andrew lived at Royal Lodge for years without ever paying market rate. The National Audit Office documented it in plain English. One brother followed the rules and paid his way. The other did not. And now, in 2026, the same institution that allowed that double standard for years was turning its attention toward the brother who had done everything right. Pause on that injustice. Sit with it for a moment, because that is the silent, ugly engine driving this entire story. And Prince Edward went even further. In 2007, he paid £5.5 million through his company, Eclipse Nominees Limited, to extend the lease to 150 years. That was long-term planning. His agreement gave him the right to sell the lease and keep the profit. He built security. He built control. He built a legal fortress around his future and the future of his children. Now look at the situation in 2026. That same property is worth around £30 million. If the Crown Estate regains control of it, it can be sold or leased for a massive profit. So when pressure started building on Edward to give it up, it was not just about modernization. The financial motive was sitting right there in the open, a £30 million asset hanging in the balance. And this is where Prince Philip's role becomes impossible to overlook. He saw this coming. That is why he made sure that letter of intent was witnessed and recorded while he still could. Philip had spent over 70 years watching how the monarchy operated behind closed doors. He had seen the institution move quietly, efficiently, and sometimes mercilessly against those it no longer found useful. He had no intention of letting that happen to his youngest son. So, as he was dying in those final moments, in the final months of his long, disciplined life, Prince Philip put his name on a document that was specifically designed to make that institutional erasure impossible. He knew that without it, Prince Edward would have no protection when the pressure finally came. And the pressure, as Philip had silently anticipated, came exactly as he predicted. So by the time March 25, 2026 arrived, Edward was ready. The legal file delivered that morning was built on 3 concrete pillars: the original lease showing his enormous personal financial investment, the letter signed by Queen Elizabeth II and witnessed by Philip, tying Bagshot Park to the dukedom for his lifetime, and 20 years of records proving he had maintained the estate at a level that had actively saved the monarchy money. 3 pillars, all independently verifiable, all notarized, all immovable. But even with all of that, one fact still made the situation dangerous. King Charles III controls the system. He controls the structure that can make life inside the monarchy extremely difficult, without ever technically breaking any rules. So even with the evidence laid out, nothing was guaranteed. The fight had only just begun. Inside Buckingham Palace, as those documents were opened and read, one thing became painfully clear. Elizabeth had made her decision. Edward had built his defense. Now, it was up to the king to decide whether his mother's final decisions still meant anything in the new reign. But hold on, because the dispute did not stay confined to land or titles. It moved fast, and it shifted into something far more personal. Earlier in 2026, before the lawyers ever walked in with that dossier, a palace official showed up at Bagshot Park with a clipboard and a quiet, polite, almost. The instruction was delivered in a casual, almost routine manner. The visit came directly from the office of Queen Camilla. On paper, it was described as a jewelry audit, a routine review, a national heritage check. That was how it was framed for the official record. But what it actually meant was far simpler. Someone had come to count and question jewelry that Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh, had worn as her own for 25 years. At the center of that audit was one specific piece, the Anthemion tiara. This was not a random item pulled from a vault. It had been made specifically for Sophie's wedding in 1999, commissioned by Queen Elizabeth II herself. It was constructed using 4 antique elements, shaped in a honeysuckle design, taken from the private collection of Queen Victoria. For nearly 2 decades, it was the only tiara Sophie ever wore. That detail matters more than most people realize. Sophie was never given open access to the grand state tiaras the way other senior royals were. That reality was understood within the family. It was never stated outright, but it was always clear. She was not positioned at the center. She remained in a quieter, more restrained role, and the Anthemion tiara became her one defining piece, her single crown, her personal symbol of the love and trust her late mother-in-law had placed in her. Take that away, and she is left with nothing. Camilla's argument arrived wrapped in legal language, but the message behind it was unmistakably sharp. Because the tiara incorporated antique elements from the era of Queen Victoria, lawyers argued that it could be classified as crown property. That classification would place it inside the central royal vault, to be issued only for official use. The implication was clear. Sophie would no longer own the tiara she wore on her wedding day. She would have to request permission to wear it, like a borrower, like an outsider, like someone whose name on the original gift no longer carried any weight. That crossed a line. And the logic behind it was dangerous, because if that argument holds, it does not stop with one tiara. It opens the door to reclaiming dozens of personal gifts given by Queen Elizabeth II over her 70-year reign. It does not stop at Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh. It reaches across the entire royal family. And here is the irony. Nobody inside the palace seemed to notice that the argument could turn back on Queen Camilla herself. A significant portion of Camilla's own jewelry collection comes directly from royal sources. Apply that same rule, and her collection falls into the very trap she was attempting to set for Sophie. Prince Edward's legal team saw that immediately. They documented it. They prepared to use it. But this situation carried something even darker beneath the surface. The public had seen this kind of move before. After Princess Diana died, a diamond and emerald necklace given to her by the Queen Mother on her wedding day in 1981 was returned to the royal vault. That should have been the end of it, a respectful return of a sentimental piece to a quiet archive. Instead, Camilla had it taken out, redesigned into a brooch, and wore it publicly. People did not stay quiet. The reaction was immediate and angry. "Has she no shame?" one voice said. "Why is this woman allowed to touch Diana's pieces?" Another demanded. That memory never disappeared. It lingered in the public consciousness for decades. And now, the same pattern was playing out again, reaching into something deeply personal and using the institution to justify it. This time, Edward did not stay silent. His lawyers responded with a single document that shut the entire argument down at its root. It was a deed of gift signed by Elizabeth in 1999. It stated in plain English that the Anthemion tiara was classified as a private wedding present, not a state loan, not a shared asset, not something held in trust for future review. It belonged to Sophie. End of debate. Elizabeth had also given Sophie. The Royal Victorian Order is not a casual honor. It is awarded personally by the monarch for direct, sustained, and valued service. So look at the full picture. Queen Elizabeth II gave Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh, that honor. She gave her a wedding tiara, and then she signed a legal document confirming that the tiara was hers. That is a queen making a direct, repeated, fully documented statement about who she trusted and who she had welcomed into her family. Queen Camilla's audit was not just about jewelry. It was an attempt to push against that record, to rewrite it, to replace it with a quieter, more controllable arrangement. But Prince Edward had gone further than anyone realized. Years earlier, in 1999, he had worked with royal jewelers to create a matching set of black and white pearl jewelry for Sophie, a necklace and earrings designed to complement the Anthemion tiara. The materials were funded through the crown, but Edward held the design rights. That detail changed everything. His lawyers argued that the tiara and the pearl set formed a single artistic unit tied to Edward's own design work. You cannot remove the tiara without breaking that artistic unit. And that created another layer of legal protection, a thread the institution had not even noticed when it walked through the front door with its clipboard. Behind all of this sat something deeply, almost unbearably personal. Sophie wore that tiara on her wedding day. Then, in October 2019, at a reception in Buckingham Palace marking the work of the Queen Elizabeth Diamond Jubilee Trust, Sophie was giving a speech in front of senior royals and guests. In the middle of that speech, she turned toward Queen Elizabeth II and said, simply, "Mama." It was not planned. It slipped out in a room where every word is usually carefully controlled. That moment showed exactly how Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh, saw her. The woman who signed that deed was the woman she called Mother. And now another woman was trying to take that away. By the afternoon of March 25, 2026, the situation reached a breaking point. Prince Edward's legal team delivered a direct warning. If the claim on the tiara was not dropped by the end of the day, they would release private letters written by Queen Elizabeth II, letters that clearly stated her wish for Sophie to retain full ownership of her personal jewelry. And according to those close to the situation, those letters did not stop there. They included words about Queen Camilla, words written privately, never intended for public consumption, words that, if released, would land like a meteor. That threat was explosive, because releasing those letters would do more than defend Sophie. It would drag the past back into the open, Elizabeth's long, cold distance toward Camilla, the years it took before she was fully accepted, and the tension that never fully disappeared. King Charles III had spent years carefully rebuilding Camilla's public image, turning her from a deeply unpopular figure into an established queen consort. Those letters could destroy that careful work in a single afternoon. This was no longer about a tiara. It was about control, reputation, and legacy, the very architecture of the modern monarchy. By the evening of March 25th, the Anthemion tiara still remained in Sophie's possession, exactly as it was given to her. But after the audit and the legal pressure, Prince Edward made his next move. He had the tiara secured in a high-security private safe under the direct control of his own security team. No one was going to quietly take it, review it, or reclassify it without an enormous, public, irreversible fight. Edward had drawn his line. The legal warnings had been delivered. The palace had been pushed into a corner. Pressure on paper was never going to be enough to finish this. What came next was not legal. It was personal, and it was about to walk through the door in the form of Princess Anne. By the afternoon of March 25th, the fight moved out of offices and into a private room inside Buckingham Palace. And when Princess Anne walked in, everything shifted. There was no small talk, no polite opening, no attempt to soften what was about to be said. She went straight to the point. But to understand why that moment carried so much weight, you have to look at what changed in the years before it. Anne and Sophie were not always close. As recently as 2021, it was clear to anyone watching that Anne kept her distance. She has always been like that. She does not fake warmth. If she does not feel it, she does not show it. Then April 2021 happened. Prince Philip died. That loss changed the structure inside the family. Both Anne and Sophie stepped forward to support Queen Elizabeth II in her final year. They began seeing each other almost every day, and over time that distance between them disappeared, quietly, naturally, in the way real bonds form in the spaces between official engagements and beside the bedside of a grieving mother. By the time of Queen Elizabeth II's funeral in September 2022, the change was visible. As they stood waiting for the coffin, Sophie reached out and placed a quiet hand on Anne's back. It was a small gesture, but it was real. It showed trust. It showed that the two of them, very different in personality, but identical in discipline and loyalty, had found in each other something neither of them quite expected. That moment mattered more than people realize, because by March 2026 that quiet connection had turned into something stronger, something protective, something ready to act. So when Princess Anne walked into that meeting with King Charles III, she was not there as Edward's sister, not strictly. She was there to defend what their mother had already decided. And she made that clear. She told King Charles III immediately that if he allowed this to continue, if he allowed private gifts from their mother to be questioned, reclassified, or taken back, then the word of a monarch would mean nothing. Then she delivered the line that, according to those present, stopped the room cold. If our mother's signature on a lease or a deed of gift is not worth the paper it is written on today, then your signature will be worth even less tomorrow. Read that line again slowly, because Princess Anne was not threatening Charles. She was attacking the foundation of the entire institution. A king's authority only works if people trust what he signs. That trust does not start with him. It is inherited from every monarch before him. Break that chain, and everything weakens. Every contract, every honor, every promise, every signature. She had also already reviewed the Bagshot Park documents herself. She knew exactly what Prince Edward had paid, what he had signed, and what the Crown Estate had accepted. The core of that agreement was simple. Edward holds a long-term legal lease over the property, backed by his own substantial financial investment, with binding terms that give him full right to live there and control it. Anne's position was direct. Edward paid for that home. The Crown Estate accepted his money under those terms. That agreement stands. There is nothing left to argue. She did not treat the tiara and the house as separate disputes. She made it absolutely clear they were the same fight. Both were things Queen Elizabeth II had personally given, both were backed by signed documents, and both were now being challenged using the same dangerous argument. And made the point directly. If they succeed in taking one, they open the door to take the other. And once that door is open, nothing Queen Elizabeth II signed would be safe anymore. There was a sad twist to this that had to do with Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh. Sophie lost her mother when she was young. Over the years, Queen Elizabeth II became the closest thing she had to a mother. Princess Anne understood exactly what that meant. She had lost her father in 2021 and then her mother in 2022. She knows what it means when those connections are gone and all that remains are the things they left behind. So when the tiara and the home were targeted and did not see paperwork, she saw something being taken from someone who had already lost enough, and from a memory that no audit, no clipboard, no review committee had any right to touch. And there was another layer that made this even harder for Anne to accept. She had seen this before. She had been close to Princess Diana. She watched how Diana's position was slowly broken down. The removal of her style, the isolation, the loss of support. She saw a woman give everything to the monarchy and then be pushed aside. Now she was watching pressure build again. Different person, same pattern, same machinery. She was not going to stay quiet this time. Then she went further. She told King Charles III that if Queen Camilla did not stop, she would act, not privately, but publicly. She would oversee a full audit of the Queen's household, not just basic numbers, but everything, expenses, staffing, allocations tied to Queen Camilla herself. That threat landed hard because and is the one person in the family who could make it real and be believed. She has a long, unimpeachable record of discipline and financial control. If she says she will expose something, people listen. And she did not stop there. She brought up Prince Edward's children, James, Earl of Wessex, and Lady Louise Windsor. There had been quiet pressure to push them into full private status earlier than planned, meaning they would step away from their protected royal position and lose security and the support that comes with it. Princess Anne stopped it immediately. She made it clear that this decision belongs to their parents and to the children themselves, not to Queen Camilla. And this mattered to her for a reason. And chose a private life for her own children, Peter Phillips and Zara Tyndall, years ago. But that was her choice. No one forced it. What she was seeing now was different. This was external pressure being applied to children who had, throughout their entire lives, served the institution with quiet dignity. Anne was not, under any circumstances, going to allow it. By the time the meeting ended, the situation had changed completely. King Charles III was left sitting with two options, both of them bad. He could back Camilla and risk damaging the credibility of his own authority, or he could step back and accept that some lines cannot be crossed. There was no clean way out, no third door, no quiet off-the-record retreat that would preserve everyone's dignity. And as Anne walked out of that room, one thing was clear: this was no longer just Prince Edward's fight. It had become a direct, formal, family-wide challenge to the king himself. After reviewing the full dossier, King Charles III's own legal team delivered their conclusion. The position of Prince Edward was virtually unbreakable. Every piece held. No royal order could override it. Charles had lost that fight. Read those words again. Charles had lost. For years, he had operated on a belief that seemed obvious to him as king. As the one who had granted the dukedom in April 2023, he believed he still held control over what came with it: the title, the property, the structure around it. His own lawyers told him in writing that he did not. What his mother had given Prince Edward was not temporary. It was a legal inheritance, and it was completely out of his reach. That alone was enough to shake him. But there was something else in the file that hit harder: the letter witnessed by Prince Philip. King Charles III knew his mother had always protected Edward and Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh. He knew where her loyalty lay. But he did not know that Philip, in his final stage of life, had formally backed that protection in writing. That detail changed everything, because it meant this was not just Queen Elizabeth II's decision. It was both of them, the longest royal partnership in modern history, united in their final months in the singular goal of protecting their youngest son from exactly the kind of institutional pressure he was now facing. But even after all this, the pressure still did not stop. Queen Camilla did not back down. Her position was specific. She wanted the same rules applied across the royal family. That meant reviewing private gifts like the tiara, tightening control over properties like Bagshot Park, and ensuring no one operated outside the system the palace was now trying to enforce. She wanted everything brought under central control. And that is where the real issue began. Because Edward and Sophie were already operating outside that structure. They had their own secured home. They had shown, over 20 years of patient and careful management, that they could function without depending fully on palace control. That made them difficult to bring in line. So now every move began to look like an effort to pull them back under control by removing the very things that gave them independence. As a result, the situation inside the palace began to break. Staff were choosing sides. People who had worked around Sophie for years began to show quiet support for the Edinburgh household. At the same time, resentment toward the Queen's office began to spread. And where there are sides, there are leaks. Private discussions were no longer fully contained. Documents, notes, internal thinking, all of it sat closer to public exposure than it ever had before. The palace, an institution long known for its internal discipline, was now divided from within. One insider put it simply, the king is being led into a minefield. He is being pushed to choose between his wife's demands and his mother's final decisions. There is no outcome that does not damage the family. That is the position King Charles III now faced. And outside the palace, the situation looked even worse. At a time when the British public was dealing with rising costs and serious financial pressure, the image of a king attempting to take a home from his brother, a home that brother had paid to restore with his own private money, would not be received kindly. It would not be forgiven. According to reports from inside the household, Charles eventually stepped outside the formal legal process. He wrote a private note, a handwritten message sent directly to Bagshot Park, requesting a family meeting. It was the move of a man who knew the law was not on his side, and who knew that for the first time in his long life as a senior royal, he could not simply order an outcome into existence. But the response he received made the situation absolutely clear. Prince Edward refused to meet unless his full legal team was present. That changed everything. This was no longer a family conversation. Edward was no longer acting as the younger brother trying to preserve peace. He was acting as someone who understood exactly what was at risk and refused to give anything up without protection. And once that line is drawn, it does not go back. You cannot undraw it. You cannot soften it. You cannot pretend it never happened. King Charles III had spent decades waiting to become king. He now ruled over a monarchy smaller than it had ever been, but inside that smaller structure, something had already broken. There was now suspicion, division, and pressure. And somewhere in Surrey, inside a house he could not legally touch, the answer to whether his mother's final decisions would still hold meaning was no longer in the control of King Charles III. Late on March 25, 2026, a formal note was sent from the office of the Master of the Jewel House to Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh. It was short, direct, no emotion, no explanation. The Anthemion tiara would remain under her exclusive private control. That was it. No apology for the audit, no acknowledgement of the pressure, no softened language about respect for the Duchess's position. At the same time, the review of Bagshot Park was quietly shut down. The official wording described it as recognition of the Edinburgh household's role in maintaining the estate. But inside the palace, no one misunderstood what had just happened. The crown had stepped back. Everything Prince Edward held was confirmed. The title, the home, the tiara, all of it stood exactly where Queen Elizabeth II had placed it. And that confirmation changed the entire balance inside the family, because this was no longer a dispute. It was now a record. That note will sit in the palace archives long after everyone involved is gone. And when it is read in the future by historians who were not even born yet, it will be clear what it means. A claim was made, it failed, and the institution was forced to acknowledge it in writing under signed letterhead. But the outcome did not bring peace. It came with a cost that cannot be repaired. The relationship between King Charles III and Prince Edward has changed completely. It is no longer personal, it is controlled, formal, limited to duty. What the public will see going forward is not the truth. They will see unity. They will see appearances. They will see two brothers standing side by side at events, smiling at the appropriate moments, performing the choreography of a unified royal family. But inside the family, everyone will know what is real. They will know that one of them had to use the law to protect himself from the other. That does not go away. That memory does not fade. That bruise does not heal. And the structure of the monarchy has shifted permanently because of it. There are now two clear centers of power. At Buckingham Palace, Queen Camilla and King Charles continue to push their vision of a controlled, streamlined monarchy. Away from that center, another group has formed, Princess and Prince Edward and Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh, supported quietly but unmistakably by Prince William and Catherine, Princess of Wales. They are not operating loudly, but they are holding a line, protecting what was built before, refusing to let it be rewritten. And that divide is now fixed. For James, Earl of Wessex, and Lady Louise Windsor, this moment will not be forgotten. They watched their father fight without public drama. He did it through documents, through preparation, through quiet, calculated strategic control. And he forced the system to back down. And one day, James will carry the Dukedom of Edinburgh, the same title his grandfather held for over 70 years. But he will carry it with a different understanding. He will know that the institution that gives can also try to take back. That knowledge changes everything. It does not create loyalty. It creates caution. It creates distance. It creates a son who will, for the rest of his life, keep one careful eye on the institution that nearly tried to dismantle his father. As for King Charles, he has his monarchy. He has his structure. He has his authority. But what he does not have anymore is the full trust of the brother who stood quietly for decades, paid his own way, and asked for nothing except to keep what was given to him. That loss does not show on paper, but it will show over time. In small moments, in missing phone calls, in family dinners that never quite happen, in the quiet absences that decade after decade define what a family really is. And long after the documents are filed and the silence settles, that is the part that will remain. A king who won the title but lost the brother. A queen consort who pushed too hard and discovered too late that some lines in the family were drawn by a hand stronger than her own. A duchess who held her tiara, her home, and her dignity intact through the patient strategy of the man who loved her. A princess royal who proved once again that she is the conscience of the entire institution. And a teenage Earl of Wessex who watched all of it happen and quietly absorbed the most important royal lesson of his entire life, the one his grandfather, on his deathbed, had wanted his father to learn. Always have your papers in order, because in the end, the only thing that protects you in this family is the ink of a signature and the courage of the relatives who refuse to let it be erased. Stay close, because the next chapter of this story, the chapter where these two new centers of power begin to operate openly in the public eye, is already being written, and you will want to be among the first to read it. The monarchy has not split in two. Not yet. But the line has been drawn, the papers are signed, the audit is closed, and history is watching every move that comes next. There is one final consideration that very few commentators have addressed openly: the British public, the people who ultimately fund and legitimize this entire institution. The public has an extraordinary instinct for fairness. They can sniff out manipulation. They can sense when an underdog is being pushed. They can tell almost without being told who is right and who is wrong in any royal dispute. And in this particular conflict, the public instinct is already swinging hard toward Edward, toward Sophie, toward the quiet couple who paid their own way, raised their children with grounded values, and stood up for themselves only when the institution tried to take what their parents had freely given. That public sympathy is a force the palace cannot easily counter. If a single major British newspaper decides to run a sympathetic feature on the Edinburgh household this summer, the contrast with Queen Camilla will be devastating. If a quiet documentary is commissioned about the restoration of Bagshot Park, the reputational gap between the two camps will become unbridgeable. And every quiet act of public dignity from Edward and Sophie, every appearance at a charity event, every interview given by Sophie to a respected outlet, every gentle royal photograph released through official channels, will widen that gap further. The palace knows this. Queen Camilla knows this. King Charles deep down knows this most of all. That is why the formal note from the master of the Jewel House landed so quickly on March 25th. The institution recognized even before the public did that prolonging the dispute would only deepen the injury. Better to surrender quietly. Better to allow the audit to disappear into the archives. Better to let the anthem tiara return to the safety of Sophie's possession. Better, in the cold calculation of palace strategy, to lose the battle and try somehow to preserve the larger war for institutional unity. But unity, as anyone who has lived through a serious family rupture knows, cannot be reassembled with paperwork. Once the trust is broken, once the lawyers have been called, once the thresholds of formality have been crossed, the relationship simply does not return to what it once was. Edward and Sophie will smile at the necessary state functions. They will stand in the appropriate positions on the Buckingham Palace balcony for the appropriate ceremonies. They will discharge their public duties with the quiet professionalism that has defined their entire royal lives. But behind closed doors, the warmth is gone, and it is not coming back. That is the real cost of what happened in March 2026. Not the legal defeat for King Charles, not the reputational bruise for Queen Camilla, not the public victory for Edward. The real cost is a family that, having survived so many other tests, has finally been forced to acknowledge that some wounds, once opened, simply do not close. The institution endures. The duties continue. The crown still passes from generation to generation. But the brotherhood, the sense of shared family purpose that once bound a generation of royals together, has fractured along a line drawn in legal ink. And no future ceremony, no future Christmas at Sandringham, no future state occasion will ever fully repair it.